so we don't miss any gems.
Ah, you started to listen to this morning's, huh?
Yeah.
What do you think of that graphic I chose for it?
Uh, well, I went to Apple Podcasts, so I don't know what I think of the graphic.
Oh, it should show it even in Apple.
Let me just double check that. I see our logo.
When you go look at all the episodes, it's not showing.
No, I'm not saying it's
This is what I see, the Moped Outlaws thing. I'll
Okay.
I'll look at the graphic. My guess, I think I saw it at 3 a.m. when I was scrolling.
What are you doing up at 3 a.m. on social media?
Well, I do this thing where I fall asleep at 9:30, and then I wake up, and I usually wake up in a kind of emotional state that I feel vulnerable talking about this podcast. But essentially, I feel anxious, and 3 a.m. is when your liver's activated, like your adrenals kick in, stuff like that. And I forgot to take my ashwagandha yesterday. Anyway, so what I'm doing at 3 a.m. is I'm allowing my mind, which wants to have a conversation with me that will keep me awake, to just kind of do what I want to do. And sometimes I need the spaciousness, the quiet of this middle of the night to really hear my inner world.
Your anxious inner world.
Well, the thing that actually helps me restore my equilibrium is the quiet, and right. And yeah, one could argue that scrolling Facebook at 3 a.m. is not the way to do that.
One could, but I am biting my tongue.
It's my fucking life.
If I want to be anxious and fucked up, then I will. Gosh darn it.
No, oh no. If I'm feeling anxious and fucked up and I want to distract myself at 3 in the morning by doom scrolling,
You can't masturbate.
Can't.
Oh, it's Kathy. Would you wake her up?
Ooh, this is not a public conversation.
It actually is. It's a podcast. That's public as you can get.
Right. But I'm not having this public conversation about this person and that idea.
I am not talking about my sexual life on a public podcast.
Well, it's not me. I'm cool with it. It's as far as I go.
But what I was saying is you would wake her up if you started whacking off.
You
So
brought
that's
her
not
into
enough?
it, and so that's why I'm shutting it down. Like if you just asked me about me and didn't actually say her name, then I would have more freedom to discuss it with you.
I understand.
Okay.
Let's bring her into the room.
She's not here.
I do understand. We can move on. We don't need to go
your
into
question. I choose not to masturbate in my life.
All right.
That's the answer.
It's a good answer.
Which is probably why I'm awake at 3 in the morning. God damn it.
Scrolling through Facebook. I'm fine. I shall not choke the chicken. I'm fine.
Maybe I should take it up again.
I don't know. It's a boy.
I have a colleague that I work with in men's work they're talking about semen retention a lot in the work that they're doing. And there's the chi, right? But there's this other energy that gets dissipated with the semen. And we've heard about this for a long time in various circles, like boxers talk about don't have sex before the fight and stuff like that. And I've heard that there's research that says it's a fallacy, right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is experimenting with my vitality. Like, how amped up can I get? And what can I do if I'm amped up? Well, apparently I can make shitty comments on Facebook at 3 in the morning.
Well, did you get some feedback this morning?
No.
You're just self-judging your comments.
Yes.
All right. It's beautiful.
It's part of my journaling exercise today is to self-judge myself.
It's to self-judge your Facebook comments. In our men's group, we are going to criticize our Facebook commenting.
Okay. We're going to analyze. I think that's also like, I put a lot of pressure on myself. And in a way, there's something about that we can talk about as being valuable in the sense of like growth and development. And then there's a shadow side to that, which is it's just fucking ego, right? That I'm supposed to be something that I'm not, right?
Yeah,
I
like
have to work so hard at it, right?
That was one of your primary things when we were coaching together is you're like, Greg, this mad thing you have for being perfect is actually fucking you up.
Yeah, and it's that age-old thing. It's like coaches, therapists, politicians, actors.
Saints, sinners,
We're all
messiahs
on this ride together, taking the class.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be School of Hard Knocks, but it's certainly, Karma Classes 101.
It seems to be like there are many a teacher who has said it's as dangerous to engage in consciousness as it is not to. Almost like they say you should engage in it, but be ready.
Yeah, one of my favorites is a guy named Adyashanti, and he says that awakening is no picnic. A lot of people have this like idea that awakening is like this la zone, like you've arrived and it's nirvana and it's bliss. And he said, maybe I shouldn't have listened to him.
That's what he said. He said, maybe I shouldn't have listened to him. Jesus came to me when I was 14. He said maybe I shouldn't have listened to him.
That when you actually break through to some opening, whether it's abiding or non-abiding awakening, it's like way more uncomfortable than being asleep.
Ignorance is bliss.
Until you don't know something that you're going to suffer about for not knowing.
Well, then you're not ignorant anymore, right?
I don't know. It's too abstract all of a sudden. Maybe I would be able to understand you better if I hadn't been up since 3.
Moving right along. Well, I really love the graphic. I think it's a very powerful image. I just love it.
I could feel your excitement about today's episode when I saw it. It's like the episode we're referring to as Art is Our Producer. It's a good episode. I've listened to the first 10 minutes of it.
It is good. If we do say so ourselves. Maybe we should start our own like newspaper or something, and we do reviews of Moped Outlaws, and we'll just give ourselves great reviews every time. But we won't, we'll call it like, give it some real fancy name.
Like the Argus Observer.
Exactly. Yeah. Really fancy masthead and everything.
Right. Some Greek letters on the sides.
Exactly. Yeah. Some vines and eagles and things.
No.
Yeah. And all it'll be is just great reviews of Moped Outlaws episodes.
Right now, we're the main people listening, so why not?
Yeah, what the hell?
I'm actually pretty inspired about what we're doing, and I've been doing some work, and that's why I'm kind of stirred up at 3 a.m. Is I'm unearthing my own growth and working on myself some more. And when you start to dust off all of the stuff and you see, oh, there's this stuff I want to do. And I got to the point where I was like, God, I got 2 podcasts in the can that I haven't posted yet from the Marc Wentz Tales from the Innerverse.
Wow.
And I'm like, ooh, it might be fun to start doing that again. And then I'm like, should I say something about not having posted anything in 8 months? Maybe not.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in blogging and podcasting is the commitment to do it regularly. And so many people fall off.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Thanks for helping me feel bad about myself.
You're welcome. No, but it's like even my own blog, my personal blog, I haven't done shit on it. The blog that I do something on is because of my accountability with my brother. This podcast, I have accountability to you. So it really does help to have some accountability, an accountability partner.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because from a philosophical standpoint, it's like we're not separate. So this idea that we have an accountability partner is really, and the integrity of showing up there's nothing they can do, right? If we don't show up,
right,
there's nothing they can do. But our ego, we're like training our ego, the thing that doesn't want to be seen as being bad. And that's the motivation we use for showing up. Like I'd really like, my hope and dream is to love what I do so much that the need for an accountability partner drops off.
Yeah.
Are you
I
thinking
think
that about yourself yet?
Well, yeah, that reminds me of Prince. Like one of Prince's quotes, I think you're the one who turned me onto it, was when he said, I don't want to be like, someone was asking why he keeps changing his band so much. He's like, I don't want to be attached to anyone because they could leave. And then what? And there's this guy, David Goggins, who's a fucking beast. I don't know if you've come across him in your work. Really inspiring story, very inspiring man. He is a physical superhuman. And part of his thing is he goes hard. Like his talk is hardcore, like that military. But anyway, so he calls it like the bitch, like the bitch mind or something, or the devil, but it's that any conversation that's telling you no, you can't do it. So he talks about like people who have to have music when they work out. He's like, what are you going to do when the music's not there? You're not going to work out? Fuck right. That. You work out. He's running in 110 heat. Yeah, it's a fucking hot day. So what? Man up, David. And he's always talking about himself. That's what I really appreciate about him. He's like, today I looked at my shoes for half an hour. I didn't want to run. Finally, I said, quit being a bitch, David. Get those shoes on. Go running. And, and
yeah, when you frame it in the I, as opposed to like making other people wrong, it's a powerful motivator, because then we all realize that it's ourselves that we have the most accountability to. And in the end, it's our disappointment in ourselves which causes the greatest wounding. I know that from personal experience. And I was literally thinking of like what I wanted to put on social media today in the framework of how I'm struggling, and this is what I was struggling with, and we all do, and that kind of giving that kind of a voice. And I haven't posted anything today, and it ultimately that felt kind of performative, and I was a little scared. Like I don't want to be that vulnerable necessarily, but that vulnerability and that willingness to be completely visible is actually the key to being connectable to people, and for your audience to find them, find you.
Yeah. I saw a great little meme that said, it's going to be hard. It's not impossible. Yeah. I thought about that when I did an ice bath last weekend for 10 minutes. I was like, oh, this is fucking hard, but it's not about, okay, just stay here. Oh, it's fucking hard.
So where was the ice bath?
In the bathtub. I bought 6 bags of ice, which cost $25 fucking dollars.
Right? Ass, and then you poured it in there, and did you wait for it to melt, or did you add?
No, you get in. Yeah.
No water.
Up with, no, cold water. Fill it up with cold water, dump 6 bags of ice in, and submerge myself as much as I can into it
Yeah,
for
it's that
10
Wim
minutes.
Hof thing. Did you do the breath stuff first?
No.
No. So what was your experience?
Well, once, there was definitely a breaking point, and once I got past that, I was fine. But then when I attempted to submerge my arms, it hurt too much. I had to pull them out. I tried twice, and I just couldn't keep them under. And again, this is me saying like I couldn't. That's the truth. That's what I chose. I can't do this. But what I thought about is like, okay, that was this time. Next time, maybe I'll be able to keep them in a little longer.
Well, and this mirrors other things where I have awareness of the mind, and the mind being this thing that shows up to say that to you. It hurts too much, right? And it showed up like not today, but last week I doubled my reps in my regimen. And there's a couple of really challenging poses in my Qigong regimen. I'm not talking about working out, guys. Like, no, I have free weights, but I'm not doing it at that level. Anyway, immediately in a couple of the different challenging poses, the mind starts to come in. Yeah. And starts having this story about what is or isn't going to happen if you stay in the pose. And that edge for men is the growth edge.
Well, it's, I think, for humans.
Yeah. And yeah, agreed.
Not for women.
Agreed. Pardon my masculine.
All right, let's move on.
I need to apologize for my apology now.
Don't be a fucking wuss.
Anyway, so that place where we meet the monkey mind or whatever it is, that's where the most growth and capacity it becomes available. And like, I remember this about myself, but I still habitually get caught up in my avoidance. But every time I break through, I have this greater sense of the possibilities, but not just for me, right? But in terms of the big picture, in terms of life. And I'll tell you, one of the scariest things that I experience is there's this moment called sealing the cauldron. And after I've done all of the different Qigong exercises, I seal my breath and I hold my breath. And when I get to that point where I can't hold my breath anymore, I realize there's going to be a time when I'm going to die. And I won't be able to stop. I won't be able to actually let the breath out and breathe. I'm going to pass through whatever that resistance is. And it's really freaky to confront that in that moment. It's just like, wow, right? And I think that's why it's there, right? It's like, okay, get ready. We're all, meditation, Qigong, like on one level, it's like, let's improve our life. But I think at a fundamental level, it's to practice for detachment from that grasping part of ourselves that eventually will be overcome. That, one day the body gives out.
Right.
And no matter what the mind is saying at that moment, there's no turning back. There's no like, oh, I'm going to pull my arms out now. Or like, I'm not going to do this rep. It's too tough. Like,
right.
When we get to the death rep.
The death rep. Marc's gym, the death rep.
Right. And so the moment
give me 10 death
there's
reps.
This moment of surrender that happens. And you don't get to, like with the death one, you don't get to actually choose anything else. But in practice,
who knows? What, maybe you choose the light.
Well, I think you're actually getting off the spot with that question. But in practice, like, now I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about surrendering, letting go, and you don't get to choose with the
When you
death.
die, you don't get to say, "Okay, I'm done surrendering. I'm gonna like let's go eat some ice cream."
Right.
Like,
This death
but
thing didn't work out.
yeah,
I
but
can't
like
do it today.
with
Maybe
that
there is
last
that.
push up, or holding your breath for that extra 10 seconds this time, the mind is what starts to fuck with the body.
Mhm.
The body actually, well, with breath, the body has its own mechanism that it'll just, when you
Here's
surrender, you'll basically breathe. But I noticed there's resistance and there's trauma in me that has resistance to these breakthrough points. And so someone like that super athlete you just mentioned, Mr. Go, is that what you called him? Mr.
David Goggins.
Goggin. Like, I'm on the other end of the spectrum from those guys. I was always like, that's not for me, super athletic stuff. It's too much. Like, I don't have it in me for that. But then I remembered how when I was a boy, I was all about like going at those edges. Like,
Yeah.
I was pre X Games, like jumping my bike over shit, dropping my skateboard into crazy spots. And I was fearless. And so I got really super curious, like, where did I cross over? Like,
When
what
did you
was
change your story? Like
what
you all of a sudden you started telling yourself this story that you weren't an athletic person. You didn't like to go hard physically.
right?
And
Yeah,
that wasn't your story when you were a kid.
right. Like, yeah, when did I change my story? When did I decide that there was something to be avoided?
Right.
Right.
What happened? Yeah.
And I have some ideas about that, but it just ends up sounding like blame if I get into it. I still have to kind of work through all of that, and I'm very clear about how the blame game. Like, I'm one of these guys, radical responsibility. Like, yeah, what did I do?
Right.
Right. And um yeah, so
Which could be like someone said something to me and I chose to believe them. That's the radical responsibility. It's still your decision. Like Greg said that I'll never be able to climb that cliff. And I chose to believe him. And from that point on, I chose to never attempt to climb cliffs.
well, I actually
Wasn't
don't
Greg's
think there was
fault.
anybody involved. I think that ultimately it was some kind of pursuit of less lethargy, pursuit, of like, hey, it's more fun to be on the couch and be stoned. Like, I think it
Have
was
this
something
big
more
old
like
bowl of
that.
ice cream.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to. And I have a choice now. I can feel shame about that and regret, which I think I do. And then the other time is, well, what value does that give me? Those two things don't actually perform any value for me. But so what I do now is I show up every day at the limit of what I'm capable of now. And I'm actively stretching that limit. Like, maybe not I'm not going as hard as you. Like, I know you, and you what's that stuff you do with the barbells and
CrossFit.
CrossFit? Like, that would probably be really good for me. And I'm like,
Come on down.
well, I got one right down the block I could probably go to.
Not with the Peterson brothers. They're the shit.
So this is, I think, the way you're talking right now, this male competitive thing. I think that's the shadow for me. It's like, I don't want to be less than, right? I don't want to be the guy, like my ego. I have to be the winner. So I better not compete, because if I'm not the winner, then it's all wasted effort.
I'd rather be the loser 24/7 than risk actually losing.
Ow!
Is this that razor's edge you were referring to a couple weeks ago? Is this what you wanted?
I'm not sure I wanted it, but it feels really fucking good right now. Ow!
Yeah. Yeah, bitch. That's razor burn you're feeling right there.
Oh.
Here's what's brilliant. I just heard this morning a woman just set a record, and I'm going to fuck up what the record is, but I think it was deadlifting for the oldest competitive woman deadlifter. I think it was deadlifting. It was definitely some sort of weight competition. 100 years old, I think she is, or 101. She started lifting when she was 81.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a story. I hear that and I'm like, all right. So the shame thing, like, I don't need to fucking worry about the past. Let me start today.
Yeah. Start with today.
Yeah.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah.
And just like with the ice bath, okay, so today I didn't put my arms in and hold them in.
Well, you did, but you only did it for what? 30 seconds?
Seconds. Yeah, I don't
Like
know.
10
It
seconds.
was pretty quick. But it was so painful. But when I got out, my thought was, okay, next time I might be able to hold them in longer. So it wasn't a waste. It wasn't like something I was ashamed of. It was like, okay, next time a little bit better.
My personal trap is I'm doing it for performative reasons. I want someone else's approval. And that sucks. Right? I really want, like, my journaling today was all about converting that into the internal desire for myself, self-resourcing. And it's hard when you have a little bit of knowledge about how the inner workings of people go as a coach, because when you start to see your own bullshit, it's even more uncomfortable, right? We were talking about awakening, and my ego has to just let go. Like, dude, this idea that somehow you're perfect or you're superior or inferior, any of that, it's just God, it's like, when can I get over this? Like, how many ice baths?
Yeah. A lot. That's the other thing. I just saw a meme, like, I think it's fucking ridiculous that you work hard in the gym to get the body you want, and then you got to keep doing it. That's the other piece to it all. Like, it doesn't stop. You don't hit the point like, I'm done now. Yay, Disneyland. It's like, no, every day.
Well, the key thing that you said there was to get the body you want.
Right.
Right.
And that can happen by changing your mind about the body you have right now. And then,
well, what I aim for is that to want to be in the gym, not because of the body that I'm going to have, but just to feel what I'm going to feel when I'm there. And that's what works for me. That's the, partially because I have super low expectations about ever looking like I'm going to.
I'm always going to be Play-Doh.
And I like, we've moved from one era, like, it used to be being cut, and now there's this other word people have been using, like, it's not even chiseled. It's not, like, the next layer beyond cut. It's like super cut or whatever. It's like, it's not.
Isn't that a hair place?
It's not like looking like Bruce Lee is not enough anymore. Like, you have to be like ultra.
Who do you look like? Fuck. It's just a skeleton. You take off the top layer of epidermis.
Well, and then like, there's the next layer, which is, once you achieve that kind of physicality, there's health and flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. And longevity. But then there seems like there's something else. And I think on some level, we all are still chasing this idea of being validated.
Well, like bringing the Om practice into this, as we so love to do, there is a joy in being upstroked. So if someone, checks you out and goes, wow, you look great today, feels good. And that's the other thing I was thinking about with talking about ego and wanting people's adoration, which feels good. And Norm MacDonald passed away last week.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of his. Always, I have been for many years. But of course, like everyone else, I did a deep dive into his stuff again. Part of what occurred to me is his humility, because people didn't talk about him the way they have the past week while he was alive and actively performing. They got accolades, but not to the degree this past week was. And I think what happened is it came to an end. And all of a sudden, all these people started coming out like, oh, and you know what he did? And all these ways he touched people on a daily basis blossomed. Like all of a sudden, people started talking about it. Where while he was alive, it wasn't really like, Norm, Norm, and crazy Norm. But all of a sudden, it ends, and it's like, wow, you know what he did? I heard, I think it was Conan saying that. No, it was who's Conan's sidekick on his show? I forget the gentleman's name.
I don't know.
Anyway, all right. So Norm came, he was going to be a guest, and this gentleman's niece was in his office, happened to be visiting the set, and he was gone. Like Norm's supposed to meet with him, and he was gone doing something. And Norm hung out with the niece for an hour, just hung out with her, talking. And she felt so good, like, because he really listened. He was interested, and that's the kind of stuff that has been coming out this week. It's like, that's who he was.
Mhm.
You know, he just had a way to help a person feel good. And I think ultimately that's what he was about, is he wanted people to feel good.
Well, I can relate to that. Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. That's a big one for me.
It's why we changed the name of our podcast, because ultimately, bottom line, we want to push buttons. We want to have fun. We want to ride the razor's edge. But ultimately, we want people to feel good. And when we found out that the name of our podcast was just a slap to the face right at the get-go, we were like, oh, that's not what we're really here for.
Right. Yeah. And I think when we push ourselves to our edges to create more expansion and better possibilities for ourselves, it ups our capacity to be better human beings, and then therefore to create a better world, and therefore for people to feel good. And that just loops back to us, right? It's like,
right.
If we live in a good world, then we can feel good. And, you know, the converse isn't actually true. Like, you know, part of my practice is to meditate, and some days like the freaking lawnmower goes off, or like today my phone rang, right? And I'm like, whatever, and I just stayed in my breath, right? So we're not subject to the environment per se. I mean, for those of you living in California who've experienced smoke, you may argue this point with me, but
well, you know, there's the people who just dealt with it and still remained a positive person, and there's the people who used, you know, yet another thing to be pissed off about.
Well, and I think that part of remaining a positive person is being willing to feel fucked up and feel our anger and feel our self-loathing and feel frustrated, because otherwise you're just cut off, right? You're not actually going to feel good all the time, but the alternative is to not feel. And that's like, it's worse, right? Like I'd rather wake up and realize, you know, the consequences of waking up and being more aware of what we're doing spiritually in reality, than to be asleep and not feel. Like the whole comfortably numb thing, or, you know, and where I'm at now is owning all the different ways that I've had addictive behavior that aren't, you know, like, oh, they're covert addictive behavior, because it's not heroin, it's not cocaine, it's not alcohol, it's not, right? But it's still this thing that's all about stroking the ego and all about creating a false sense of self-worth out of this externalized experience. And yeah.
I think there is merit, though, to saying, hey, Mark, you look great today. And like now maybe it pisses you off, but there's like the Pollyanna thing I've always thought is a good thing. I've never really
Well, it's interesting because last week we were talking about whether it's appropriate or not to tell a woman she looks beautiful without consent, right? We talked about that last week.
Right.
And my perspective then was a lot harder than it is now, partially because you were telling me I look good. No, just kidding.
I like your breast.
Man bra.
See, that just sliced all sorts of different ways. I I do think like it's okay to go through life doing one's best to help people be happy should they so choose. Like there's an element of, smiling at someone and they just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
So what? I was talking with someone we both know, and she Saturday was downtown at the Mill Valley Art Festival and saw this guy she's seen all around Mill Valley for like 40 years, growing up here, and introduced herself, and he just was gruff. And as he walked away, she said, a smile would have been really great. It would have been awesome. And he just kept walking. And then she felt bad about that. She went and apologized.
And men do that to women. Like, hey, baby, like, how about a smile? And then we talk about how that's misogyny on a certain level. Like, our expectations are not for other people to fulfill.
Here's the thing, though. Ultimately, like radical self-responsibility is fuck all that. Because if you say, hey, Greg, you look great. And I'm like, you're like, well, you could have smiled and like whatever each of us is feeling doesn't matter what the other did ultimately. I'm choosing my gruffness and I will continue to choose it. Like I'm choosing my joy.
I hear that. I totally agree. I'm sorry I argued with you last week.
That doesn't but that's where it's so interesting. Like, I believe there's merit to knowing history, the truth. But there's also a point where it's like, so what? Not so what, you suffered, so what? Who cares? No, it's like, yeah, you suffered. Your ancestors suffered horribly.
It's not
I want to be
now what?
Right, exactly. That's it. Now what? Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a dream last night you spit on me.
Well, did you really?
So you wonder what's been keeping me up since 3 a.m.
Oh, they say turnabout's fair play, Marc.
Yeah. I must have a guilty conscience.
That's right.
Didn't pay enough attention on the Day of Atonement last week.
That's you spit on me. Ray Albrecht, our dear brother, he slugged me once. I have certainly pushed my friends to the breaking point more than once.
Are you keeping score?
No, those are just the two that I guess affected me enough to stay.
That are permanently etched in your trauma memory.
Exactly. On my deathbed, I'll be blaming you and Ray for the fact that I didn't actually succeed in life. Fuck this self-responsibility shit. It was Ray and Marc. Fuck them.
Give me some more morphine, damn it.
I don't want to feel anymore.
Oh my God. We have a one of the guys who used to be the bass player in Illumination. He goes to the dentist and doesn't get Novocaine. And I was crazy. Like, wow, what the hell? Why? And he's like, it's just pain. It's just something of the mind. And I'm like, what the hell? Right? And I'm like, fuck. There's no way. Like, right? And it's that same thing we were talking about a few minutes ago. It's like, can you manage that? And he's like, for whatever reason. And I was just thinking about this the other day, contemplating death and suffering. And like, so many of us now in America, especially, if we're above a certain level, we have morphine when we die. Like, nobody has to necessarily die without morphine now.
Right.
Like 50 years ago, not even that percentage was way lower. And I was thinking to myself, all right, so if I went to the most like advanced Buddhist guru I could think of asking this question and said, should I let them give me morphine when I'm about to die? What's that going to do to me in the afterlife? What's that going to do to my experience of the karma? As if like there's some way where you're supposed to try really hard to die right.
That's so funny.
Like that's the level of trying so hard I'm at, like in my life right now. It's like,
which door do I go through? Door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? Tell me, master. Burn the doors.
oh, if you see the Buddha on the trail, kill him.
That's like here again from Course in Miracles. For me, part of the joy is all this madness and chaos of the right way, the wrong way, and all this doesn't even exist. Because in the true divine nature, all is perfect, always has been, always will be, because that's how divinity creates. It can't create anything else. And I was thinking about this just Saturday morning, because I was thinking how it used to bother me, the question of like, well, if God exists, why did he create suffering? Why did he create war? Why? And then I realized, oh, he didn't create that. So a better question is, why does suffering exist?
Mm-hmm.
You know, or why do I believe suffering exists?
Mm-hmm.
And so all these things, the right way to die, you know, be a man and don't take the Novocaine, or, you know, be a man and apologize when you're wrong. Like, who cares? We're all perfect.
Right. And then there's moments where choosing to stretch a little against that discomfort actually yields something of value.
Yeah.
But we get to choose it, right? The idea that someone should, that's where we start to get around the edge. Now, let's talk about vaccines.
Wait, okay, perfect. Because I noticed you were watching the Spike documentary more.
Right.
Okay, I'm just a bit into episode 2, but I finished episode 1, and it looked like you had at least gotten halfway into 3.
I'm done with episode 4.
Okay, all right. Part of what I love is I think he in essence is saying, okay, all you people who support Agent Orange, you know, President Orange, that's Agent, like all you people, look at what you're really supporting. All you people who think this whole thing is a hoax, like, look, here's some people, and it's a fucking like 2-hour episode, right? Like there's like all these doctors and nurses and EMTs and people whose parents died and on. And you're like, oh, that's kind of where I came up, because there's a part of me that wants to give the benefit of the doubt to the stories I hear. Like maybe Donald is, you know, there was some element of good to the person. But here in watching this, I'm like, oh, this guy really was a fucker. And like this pandemic is real. It is really happening.
And he fast-tracked the vaccine. He sent money from the federal government to get that shit going as quickly as it could possibly get done.
Is that in the documentary?
I don't know, but it's the fact. It's a fact.
Oh, we're about to get disturbed, I think.
What?
Someone's coming up the stairs.
Oh.
Hey, no, Neil, we're doing our podcast. Get out of here.
Well, have him come in. How often do we get Neil on our podcast?
He won't do it.
Neil, come on in here.
He shies away from this stuff.
But he wanted to hang out with you.
Well, he's actually looking for something.
Oh, got it. He wants some art paint or something like that.
Yeah. But no, I've attempted to do an episode with him twice. And every time he comes up the stairs and I'm on a Zoom, he like flips out. Public eye is just too much for him.
Yeah.
Always has been.
I get it. I think that affected the ideal husband's career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I was saying is one of the things about that period of time in American history was he did make a decision to marshal a whole bunch of federal money and forces to back the vaccine production. And
Okay.
he didn't do it single handedly, but one of the things that people forget to do is give credit to him for some of the things that he did well.
Right. Like now we're seeing the atrocity going on in Afghanistan. And he definitely, like, he didn't just pull everyone out immediately. Well, you know what? I'm not quite sure about that one.
Well, but
Oh, no.
he set it up so that the withdrawal would start.
Here's part of what I guess was really prevalent in this documentary from Spike is he definitely fanned the flames of hatred. He
Mike
he
does.
he what the actions I saw him that I saw, especially the most obvious one is the church, where he called in the army, the federal guard, the police to clear out the peaceful protest that was happening so that he could go take a picture with the Bible in front of the church. Like, that's a real fascist move.
Well, yeah. Mostly it was narcissistic.
Well, the fascists are narcissists.
Yeah, but in this case, I don't give him enough brilliance to think of like is actually setting out to rule the world. I think he's just narcissistic and egoic. So it was a terrific misuse of power. Don't get me wrong. To clear the public protest so that he could take a picture with a Bible.
And not
Something
just
which he's flouting. I mean, at that point, this dude, like, I personally, I would not wave a Bible around just based on my own iniquity, right? Who am I? Like, no. So that was like double indemnity.
that was what was so funny. They used tear gas and, from what I've heard,
that's the irony
force,
of it.
batons, and
Yeah.
like, fuck you, bitch. All right, Jesus, love, peace.
Yeah.
All right.
It was really just about a show of force, right? Like Spike says in the thing, he says they sent a message to everyone that was protesting, like, this is what I will do to you. Now that's fascism.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And we might have him back like 2024.
Make America hate again.
Yeah. Yeah. I think after having experienced it, America's smarter than that now. I think.
Oh no, there's a lot of people that still
There are. I agree. Totally. And not every place is like California where they'll push that stuff back.
Right. But it's like Newsom not being recalled is kind of a positive in the big picture of, people acted. I don't think Newsom and Pelosi are so far removed from the dawn, in their own way that they do their life.
Power corrupts. Absolutely. Right. So we have all of this mechanization, the machinations of what it takes to get elected in this country that undermine, and we look at someone like AOC.
Right.
Whose name deserves actually being pronounced properly.
Well,
Alexandra
I don't think
Ortega-Cortez.
Yes. And I was going to mention her and also the gentleman representative from the Bronx that was in episode 1 a lot. Like, they seemed like honest politicians and even like me saying that kind of gets stuck in my gut and throat. I'm like, so I have resistance to that train of thought that a politician.
I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to just say yes or no right off the top of your head. Would you vote for me?
Yes.
Okay.
So
there are certain classes of humans that inspire our trust.
Well, on the recall thing, how you could say no recall. However, if he is recalled, I vote for this person. I voted for you.
Did you?
Yeah.
Liar.
I did. That's real.
That's awesome. I didn't vote for anybody, and then later I was like, oh shit, I should have put somebody down, because there was this whole thing of like, if you didn't put someone down, we might be really screwed. And
Oh
I'm
my
like, whatever. And I was so
God.
glad I was right, because for a while there, it was waking me up at 3 a.m. worrying about it.
I was going through Facebook. Finally got through that. Now it's just Greg spitting in my face that has me up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you the details of the dream. It was pretty um
Were you
like
teasing me
not I
about this
couldn't
date I had with this
I,
limo and everything?
I don't know. Is that's what happened with me, huh? You were teasing
Yeah.
me about
It
midnight.
was the night that you had that big date with the limo and all this, and I must have said something that pissed you off.
I had a lot wrapped up in that, which was a really great, wonderful lesson in disappointment.
I really set that one up for a very big lesson.
It was great. Like, my mom was getting married in San Francisco. And so I had a reason to have a tux. And I was coming from that, and then I had um, made arrangements to pick up my date at her house and go to this club in Corte Madera, which is now closed, a club called Uncle Charlie's, which was still open back then. And I was, this is a weird way to use this word, I was pedestaling this woman, which was meaning I wasn't actually having a relationship with her. I was having a relationship with the part of her that I concocted in my own mind, that I
She was the
projected
one.
onto her.
She was everything.
And so I had spent several weeks and a little bit of money doing this song demo of a song I wrote for her. And I'd produced it and I'd gotten it on a cassette, and I decided, fuck it. And I rented a limousine.
Yes, you did.
So I showed up at her house, and I'm like, let's go. And she gets in the limousine and she's like, she's like not feeling good about it. And I had the exact opposite expectation. I'm like, I'm in a tux, I'm picking her up in a limousine, and I'm going to play her this song I wrote for her. Everything is going to be amazing. And she just completely retracted. Like, it was way too much. Now, the truth is, we really did have a rapport, but I wasn't developed enough in my own life to know how to really connect. I had to perform what I think you're supposed to do. And so I put all this extra fucking frosting on this cake that wasn't needed, metaphorically speaking. And I don't remember whether you purloined me after the fact or before the fact. I don't remember.
Or it was like you hadn't left, you were about to go. And
And
that's
so
how I
you
remember
were
it.
giving me crap for going all out on this stupid girl, like something like that. And I got
Something. I
insulted.
said something.
Yeah. Well, you definitely poked a hole in something that was gonna get a hole poked in it anyway.
So what was her reaction to the song?
I think she appreciated it musically, because she was a really good singer. And I think that the frosting, the way I laid everything on so thick, created all kinds of pressure and all kinds of expectations. And I wasn't actually relating to her as who she was. I was, again, like I said before. So it's hard to be enthusiastic about something, even something that was genuinely good. Like, the song wasn't bad. I mean, it was an 80s. It was the 80s when we did it. And so
That sounded like so keep that in mind if you ever hear
it was
it.
a
Okay.
drum machine, and it was a DX7 keyboard, which, for those of you who understand the synths of the 80s, there was that. And my guitar playing was okay, but my singing still hadn't really fully matured. Like, I'm a way better singer now. In fact, I should probably start performing that song again, because it's a decent song. And it's about a mythical creature who didn't really exist.
Apropos.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how that all happened. And she eventually, we got to the club, and like, she wasn't having fun, and we looked weird in this rock club with me in a tux and her. I mean, she looked great. She was dressed 80s club color, like really colorful, and she was a beautiful, exotic, sexy woman. But I'm sure the room could read like, oh, she's not having it with this guy. Like it was so obvious. And so we didn't stay very long. And then I dropped her off, and like I could tell right away there was no reason to even go for like the goodnight kiss. This is like a bad 80s movie script now that I think back on it. Like,
Was there
right?
Coke?
No.
Oh, well, that's one key ingredient to a bad
Well, I
80s.
wasn't down with that. Like
Right.
all my, some of my friends and neighbors were really into it. And maybe this is the one sliver of silver in the gray that like I wasn't going to stoop to that.
I'd do everything else, but
Maybe I
wasn't
should
a
have
Coke
added
whore.
maybe if we'd done lines in the car, it would have been better.
I don't know. I don't know.
I
Like,
didn't.
do you think ultimately, like your in your imagination, a night of sex was the climax of the whole evening?
Well, that would have been the beginning of a whole experience,
Lifelong,
like a relationship at least. I don't know if
right?
it would have been lifelong.
Oh, really? So you weren't picturing kids and
No, and ultimately she did have kids. And at one point, she was living near this place that I was working in Santa Rosa, and she had two kids, and she was a single mom, and she was struggling. And I had heard from her, and so I would drop by there at lunch for an hour just to visit with her, and I was able to be encouraging and soothing. Like our friendship had a quality to it, even though it didn't work out for us romantically. There was always this kind of warmth there. But that thing that I've been talking about throughout this whole podcast about myself, which is this limousine trip, is another example of trying too hard instead of relying on the core essence of who I really am. Right. So that big mistake in that relationship was that I always showed up inauthentically trying to be something more than I was,
you know what's
even
interesting,
later.
right? There is an element of what's real. Like, so on Instagram, some woman pinged me, and every now and then I get a ping from someone like, "Hey, are you okay being friends?" And I'm just like, "All right, here's another, scam looking for the lonely old man." And anyway, um, but I go like, "Yeah, sure, I'll be your friend," and play along. And Friday, she, asked me about, like, somehow it came up. She said, "Oh, you don't have your home?" I said, "No, I rent a room." Haven't heard from her since. And there is this reality, like, I think a woman that I would want to date and be with wouldn't want to be with me where I'm at in life right now with this beater truck. I'm renting a room in someone's home. And there's a part of me that's very grateful for what I have. I have this great room. My son's living here. So I was able, the woman who owns the home is allowing it to be. And that's a lot of gratitude for that. I'm grateful I have a vehicle at all. Be a difficult life without it. But there's also the reality of like the relationship that I'd want to be in, the one I'd like on the, because as you know, there's the surface level relationship, and then you start diving in and you get to the point where it can be for better or worse because things happen in life. But for right now, starting off with the worst, I wouldn't like if a woman, like, yeah.
So there's this primary disapproval of yourself in there. You're basically saying I wouldn't join a club that would have me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the invitation for both of us, because I'm not separating myself from that dynamic, the invitation for both of us is to become that person that we would want to date.
Exactly.
To
Yeah.
become the person that right? And it's worthiness isn't the right answer because we're totally worthy. Our hearts
Right.
are worthy. But masculine appeal has this component of producing. We need to be producers in our culture. There's a material element of it. And it's one of the weird things for independent women who've been successful in their financial life, more successful than some men, when they come across men that they like, who they feel attracted to, but in a strange way, if they aren't producing at the same economic level as they are, that's a disconnect for them, like at a sort of root level. And I think it's a symptom of the way our materialist society has been constructed. But at the same time, if you broke it down to just the primal, it would still be the same, right? It's not the context, really. And, you know, I struggle with my own self image around my economic productivity and my own, the way I've invested the various times I've had wealth and the ways I've had wealth. And the women around me do a better job of it. And I'm curious about that. And I believe that I'm capable of creating it again. And I believe that there's a possibility. And so I'm deep at 3 a.m. when I'm not sleeping. I'm looking for that part of myself that wants to live a certain way so that I can anchor that desire to my productivity so that it has a place to go, so that it has a thing to flow to, so that like I got up today motivated to make something happen. And it's because I want to have economic success, but I want it to be anchored to what I really want out of life, which is to be of service to people. And so I'm actually in full approval of this possibility for myself, and I'm deeply anchored into the desire of achieving the success around it because it's a purpose based, it's about what I want, and it's motivated. And sort of the additional dark side of that is when I'm failing at it, it makes it so much worse than as if I were failing as like an accountant. And I could blame being an accountant as a boring life and failure, right? Right. So it's like it comes with so much more angst when you're driving from purpose and creating from that place. But I don't think I'd have it any other way.
I just experienced something this last week where I had an audition Monday and I killed it. It was awesome. And as the day progressed, I kind of like in my gut was thinking, I don't think I got it. Even though I killed it, like the director had a great time, I had a great time. I was able to do what he was asking. And then I got an email from him Friday night saying I didn't get the role. And he said what happened was that they chose someone who they felt better partnered with the other character on a whole.
Right. Better chemistry.
Right. But he's hoping to work with me in the future and thought I did great acting, etc.
That's great. When a guy takes the time to actually say that to you, that's a pretty good thing.
Right. And
I
wrote back
like, you
to
didn't
him.
get the part.
Well, I wrote back to him and I said, of course, I was hoping to get the part. This isn't the news I was hoping for, of course, but I didn't feel bad. Now
Right.
and then I'd have little sparks of feeling bad, but I'd be like able to go, wait a minute, let that so I was still had gratitude for nailing that audition, and it did not take away from my energy to want to do more auditions. Whereas when I feel like, oh, fuck, failure, then all that energy and juice to keep doing it disappears.
Yeah.
So again, kind of like the bathtub, if we're like, okay, today it was this far, tomorrow, so that's great. Like the positive is like, I've got some stuff to work on.
I totally agree. So every day is another chance to show up and do better with love in our hearts and generosity towards the human condition and compassion for what everyone else is going through. But most of all, compassion for ourselves.
Yeah.